Okay, here's another element of the John Banks case. I'm making a video out of it because otherwise these words are probably going to be wasted. I doubt I'm going to get a chance to say it in court tomorrow, but here goes. This is one element of just what a line of stitch-ups this man has suffered for the last few years. Goes back at least as far as 2013, the amount of persecution he's undergone. Here goes. One item, initially in the schedule of behaviour, has been removed but is still referred to elsewhere in the evidence pack submitted by the prosecution. I would like to remind the court what happened in that case because it perfectly exemplifies how the police can make an accusation which makes no sense at all and can then successfully prosecute Mr. Banks while the rest of us look on in disbelief. Mr. Banks was walking into an EDL demo in Farnworth, Bolton on the 26th of August 2013. There was a large crowd of left-wing protesters behind a line of police. The avowed intention of that crowd was to harass the EDL protesters and try to cause alarm and distress to us. The purpose is to deny us our right to freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. Mr. Banks noticed a communist flag was upside down. He pointed at the flag and said, "It's upside down, you prick," scoffing at the incompetence of the man who was holding the flag. A police officer, PC 19046 Butterworth, claims what he said was, "You fucking Islamic twat." The police officer also claims Mr. Banks was pointing at the man rather than pointing at the flag, which the man was holding. Two witnesses with Mr. Banks heard it, the same way Mr. Banks heard it. Even so, 4 police officers then wrestled him to the ground and handcuffed his hands behind his back. The man holding the flag gave no indication, whether by words, actions or appearance, to lead anyone to assume he was a Muslim. He was not dressed in Muslim attire and was not Asian. The police officer maintains he was holding an Islamic flag. The police officer was shown a communist flag with a hammer and sickle in court and identified that as the Islamic flag he saw on the day. And in his witness statement, it is described as a red flag with yellow writing in the corner, in the top of the flag, which actually would have been the bottom, wouldn't it? It's upside down. But never mind, he identified it in the court. And the magistrate then said, "That's not an Islamic flag, it's a communist flag." The magistrate himself recognised it. Let me remind you that the communist flag, which has nothing whatsoever to do with Islam, is the only reason for the police officer to assume him a Muslim, and the only person who thinks it is an Islamic flag is that police officer. Not the magistrate, not Mr. Banks, not the man holding the flag. There can't be many people out there who are unfamiliar with the communist flag and imagine it is an Islamic flag. So why, even if Mr. Banks was genuinely inclined to shout such religious epithets, why would he shout that at a guy who did not present as a Muslim and was instead presenting as a communist? The police officer was convinced that the sickle was on there because it was Islamic. Even though this one indication of the man being a Muslim was, by the admission of the magistrate, nothing to do with Islam, even though the one and only indication of the victim being Islamic was shown to be nonsense, the case went ahead. Mr. Banks was found guilty of religiously aggravated harassment, alarm or distress, under the Crime and Disorder Act of 1998, 31, subsection 1, part C. He was fined £370, including the fine itself, £100, the costs, court costs, £250, and £20 as a contribution to a so-called victim fund. He appealed the conviction, as you would. The conviction was upheld, and his fines and costs were increased to more than £800. The policeman's story makes no sense at all. The magistrate must surely have known that. There was not even a 1 in a million chance of Mr. Banks having said that, unless he had Tourette's syndrome. But there's no jury, and nobody is allowed to be a journalist unless they are pro-Islamic. So both magistrates who heard this case could just smirk and pretend to be convinced that this was a legit prosecution, guilty beyond all reasonable doubt. Maybe it seems hilarious to left-wing magistrates and judges, and they get a buzz out of being able to rub our noses in it like this. The faster we wake up the voters, the sooner the laughing will stop.